it is the information that is coming from these people that we regard as scientifically important information, even though they are not educated people. So we want them to be part of the scientific community. When we go to conferences and present work that is coming from here, basically what it means is that the mothers and sisters of Umbumbulu, Ogagweni, Ezigeni, Ezimwini, Kwamsholozi are actually part of the scientific community.
For the farmers, one of the most striking shifts was the realization that because there was a consumer demand for amadumbi, this food, boring and labor-intensive to grow, was a sought-after organic vegetable. Taking advantage of traditional rural capabilities is a difference which made a difference. Because when we are looking at increasing capabilities, and we understand that this requires knowledge, skills, attitudes and behavior over time, the way in which the Ezimbila farmers were able to engage in market-oriented agriculture was the result of the market adopting a practice of supporting small-scale farmers in order to drive development and protect the environment. The farmers being inspired by recognizing opportunity and electing a gatekeeper who brought the two worlds together, and by participatory research activity and responsiveness by the project team, which resulted in increased confidence to recognize and explore new farming strategies.
Okay, the produce and zinc irrigation scheme were the point of entry of the study, and they were divided into categories. Markets of produce differ with different producers. So now looking on how the markets operate between the producers and the informal traders. Traders scour the field in search of supply, and they work in groups for safety reasons. They harvest and for themselves, picking only what they perceive to be the good quality. So in this case, each person here is for himself, okay? So there are stages where they collaborate and the stages where they compete against each other. Informal traders do play an important role in marketing of produce at the irrigation scheme. From the local trade that has been created as a result of the irrigation scheme, there are other activities that have been created, like taxi operation.
We sort of focus our research on smallholder farming, where we try to get different people to work together and therefore provide more comprehensive perspective of agriculture. The problem is that you provide free infrastructure and startup funding. Now you have a group of people who produce for free, and they now want to market, and they'll drop their price to whatever to get rid of the birds. Many of the individual projects appear to be sustainable and provided substantial benefits to the entrepreneurs.
I'll be sharing with you the on-farm transformation of grain into poultry feed at value. The main objective of our study is to develop soybean and maize grain processing procedure for on-farm use under smallholder circumstances, and also to determine the biological performance. Use of on-farm diet is expected to become increasingly advantageous with degree of remoteness because of rising costs of transporting and purchasing feed.
What we found with the women's groups is that if they have one man or a sleeping man as part of their group, they have far more access to the community resources. But the biggest problem was no credit available to buy stuff. They had no local banking. You go into a community to help, it develops into self-help projects, and then it needs to go to where the systems which support that business need to adapt to incorporating those. We have tried to get SPA interested in small-scale farmers, and they work through agents, and the agents aren't interested. So we need to find a different pathway whereby they can provide things. Thank you very much.
So today I'll just focus on how these women use the cross-border initiative. What they wanted to do was to pioneer South Africa. Some of them had never came here, but maybe in as much as the land reform is bad, to them it gave them the opportunity to visit South Africa. There's this issue of urgency. How do people cope under difficult circumstances, and what strategies do they develop? 1,000 rand might be small when you talk of it, or 500 rands. But what I've seen about these women, they really appreciate it. It keeps them going. They can pay the school fees for their kids. Their households can go on because they live in a rural area, so they don't have any need for paying rent or stuff. Policies should reflect these changes. And then implications for future research. I think, to the best of my knowledge, this is the only qualitative work in Zimbabwe that has looked at land, agriculture, marketing, and women from the perspectives of anthropology.
One of the women farmers that we worked with in northern Mozambique was saying the same thing I think someone said yesterday about, well, we go to the field and we just scratch around because we don't have much to do. So where are these markets? Here we're working with Sakao, NASFAM, and Zimbabwe Commercials Farming. But we want to work with them around policy analysis, campaign and advocacy, and organizational management, improving those weaknesses that Marianne was saying about, these groups don't function. There's no transparency, nobody trusts them, and things like that. To address poverty, we've got to support smallholder farmers to produce and access markets. So everybody agrees that, but the how is the problem. So first of all, get the voice of people affected into the debate, because it's not there.
But they have to link to impact, science for impact, capacity building at individual levels, at organizational levels, etc., etc. So actually, I'm very happy at the position I am in with the Center for Development Innovation. You have to have an understanding, a common understanding of poverty. Poverty is very much something that you suffer at an individual level. You also see, if you look at an intra-household, that the most powerful one in the household is going to get most, and the others will have to. So subsistence farmer for me is already the most simple, conceptually speaking, example of a chain, supply chain, value chain, whatever you name it. Yeah, but the focal area here is market access for sustainable development. It relates to how can markets work for the poor. How can we use markets to tackle, alleviate poverty. That's the focal area. So this is an economic perspective on poverty. Yeah? And I don't do away with the other perspectives of dignity, of capabilities, of including public goods or only private consumption.
Entrepreneurs, large scale, small scale, and also, I mean, if you talk about entrepreneurial farms, obviously you have in mind that there are also non-entrepreneurial farms. If you talk about subsistence farmers, you mean that there is also the opposite, commercial farming, right? And the emergent farmer is in between. He moves or she moves from subsistence to emerging to become the final commercial farmer, right? So these reflect particular paradigms that I would like to refer to as the modernization paradigm, where, let's say, development is coined in terms of modernization. And typical of the modernization paradigm is that development proceeds in a linear way, right? Proceeds in a linear way. You move from subsistence to emerging to commercial. The point I'm making is that that kind of notions and that thinking in terms of development ignores that there are other things happening. So you're ignoring existing repertoires, existing practices that are based on different ways of using resources, either of identifying resources or relating in a different way with the market.
I mean, you have to bring in knowledge from outside, of course, but you can repackage a lot of what is already existing, so that it can respond better to the markets and the needs of the world, not just the needs of the community themselves. Because in order for them to grow, they need to have access to the world.
Let's